Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi and welcome. With us today is the Marketing Director of Edmund Hillary Brands, a clothing company creating high-quality garments with the launch range being inspired by the climbing gear that carried Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay on the first ever ascent of Mount Everest in 1953. She is here to share the journey of the company, from the initial spark of an idea, a decade of research, development, dedication, courage, obstacles and setbacks, all while staying true to their vision and not wavering on quality, ethics and sustainability, and then to the launch of the business into a highly competitive $76 billion industry. So proud to be part of the Edmund Hillary legacy. Please welcome Clare Hall-Taylor. Hi Clare, and thanks for coming on today. Gosh, the brand sounds so amazing and so apt that it's leaving a legacy to Sir Edmund Hillary, who is a national icon and an absolute treasure here in New Zealand. He was totally loved and he obviously still is. So can you just tell us a little bit about the brand?
Sure. So it started off in 2008 when my husband and kids and I were on holiday in New Zealand, and we were travelling around the South Island when we heard that Sir Edmund Hillary had died, and we realised then just how loved he was in New Zealand, an absolute national treasure. And when we went back to the UK, we could have read up about him and learnt more about his history and realised just how incredible he was, because he didn't just climb Everest, he also led masses of expeditions around the world, but more importantly for him, he dedicated 50 years of his life to helping the people of Nepal, and he built 42 hospitals, schools, clinics, and he built an airstrip there and put together thousands of educational scholarships for the Sherpa people of Nepal. And he considered that to be his greatest achievement. So when we discovered all of this about him, my husband Mike had the idea of creating a brand that would help continue his legacy and help support his charities. So he made contact with Peter Hillary, who is Sir Edmund Hillary's son, and Peter had been having similar kind of ideas at the time and wanted to do something internationally. So he and Mike met up when he was over for Edmund Hillary's memorial service at Windsor Castle with the Queen, and he and Peter really hit it off, and that started a kind of a 10-year process of developing this brand before we launched last year at New Zealand Fashion Week.
Wow. So we're a year down the line, because this Fashion Week's about to happen again, isn't it? Now?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Okay, so 10 years, so there's people out there who think you can start a business overnight, which some people can, but that 10 years is a pretty long time, isn't it, to be working on something?
It is, yeah.
So
and it's incredibly hard to establish a clothing brand, which we've realised, and it's a crowded market. It's a market that the brand has to be really quite different and has to stand out, and it's not just about having a really strong brand name. It's actually about producing clothes that people want to wear and that are a bit different from so you can hook people in with the story and people want to kind of be involved with the legacy and the charity. But ultimately, they have to buy something that they want to wear, and that's the kind of really challenging bit for us.
So Claire, tell us a bit about why we would buy your clothes as opposed to another brand.
So what we're finding is, because people are moving away from fast fashion, they are looking for more meaningful purchases. So people buying, maybe a few pieces each year, but putting a bit more thought into it and buying clothing that lasts. And what we find is the type of people that are drawn to Edmund Hillary clothes, they're drawn to the story of the brand, but they also have their own stories, and they're people that like to have kind of moments and adventures, and they like to share those adventures with people. So whether it's actually doing the adventure with somebody or maybe talking about it afterwards. And the clothing kind of opens conversations, so people often ask, what's that brand? And they talk about Edmund Hillary, they talk about his story, and then they talk about the fact that they like doing those adventures themselves. So it opens up those conversations. I remember speaking to one guy who is a hiker and mountaineer, And he told me that, when he goes out hiking or to climb a mountain, the two best bits of the day are, the first one is 10 steps before you get to the summit, because you're just about to kind of achieve it. And the second best moment is that first beer with your friends, telling them the story of the day. And kind of that's what I think we're about as a brand.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
That story is so important, isn't it? Jo and I are all about story. I love the quote from Edmund Hillary. I don't know if I particularly want to be remembered for anything, but there's no doubt that the building of schools and medical clinics has given me more satisfaction than a footprint on a mountain, which is just lovely. And I know, Clare, that you also invest in outdoor education for young people through the business. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So Edmund Hillary was also really passionate about outdoor education, particularly for young people. And so he was involved with the centre at Tongariro it's now called Hillary Outdoors, but it used to be called the Outdoor Pursuit Centre. And they run outdoor programmes that encourage children to learn skills by being pushed out of their comfort zone outdoors. So we actually had experienced one of these courses, and they're pretty challenging. So you're doing things like going caving, you're rock climbing, and the instructors kind of really try and understand where the people are, in terms of their comfort level and ability, and they just encourage them to push themselves further. And so there's a foundation set up where they take kids who've got leadership potential from low-income families that couldn't afford to do the course, and the foundation pays for these kids to go on these leadership courses, and they're completely life-changing. So I remember seeing one story about a girl who was kind of getting into a lot of trouble at school, but she's quite a charismatic girl, and she went on this course and she's now in the police force. Oh. Yeah, so they're amazing courses. And so our some 2% of every sale will go into the trust that will be distributed among charities like that, as well as the charities that support the Himalayan work.
And are these all charities that Sir Edmund Hillary was involved in before he passed away?
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And Clare, I know that ethical sourcing and production is of utmost importance to your brand. Can you tell us about that vision?
Absolutely. So, interestingly enough, I was actually at a talk at New Zealand Fashion Week this morning all about sustainability in the fashion industry, and there's no doubt that the fashion industry has got a long way to go on this, but a lot of companies are really committed to improving on that, and there are sort of several aspects to it. I mean, one aspect that we're sort of focused on is about durability, so less about fast fashion and loads of clothing going into landfill, and more about producing clothes that last, that people invest in to buy, that they'll wear year after year and get repaired when they want to. So we're producing kind of long-lasting clothing. There are also aspects such as traceability of the supply chain, so knowing exactly where every element of the materials have come from, that they're not using any kind of treating the workers really well, and also using products that won't end up putting chemicals into the water system, that kind of thing.
So really looking at sustainable development. I see that you've got some wonderful jumpers. I love the jumpers on your website. Is that wool coming from Nepal?
Not from Nepal actually, but it certainly will be. In fact, we're just producing some accessories that are being made in Nepal, but out of New Zealand wool. Wonderful. Interestingly, because it's quite a nice connection, with New Zealand and Nepal. We're also producing quite a lot in Europe using British wool, because the original expedition on which the clothing designs are based on the original designs from the 1953 expedition, and we're even using some of the original manufacturers that made those clothing, and using British wool, the same kind of British wool that was used in the original expedition. So our clothing isn't actually mountaineering gear, it's sort of gear to wear day to day. But if it was, back in the 1950s, it would have been technical climbing gear, the wool and the cotton and the materials that we used back then.
And you've talked also about the rental market. That's quite a new, interesting concept in the idea of clothing. Tell us about the rental market.
Yeah, so the whole kind of sharing economy. So increasingly people are renting clothes, which is kind of a bit of a win-win for consumers, because not only are you not having to spend as much, you can also sort of rent clothes for special occasions, and that's always been there, but it's kind of increasing, and particularly among young people. And so we've been looking at the possibility of renting clothes to people that perhaps want to have a jacket that they wouldn't necessarily wear all the time. So just say, for example, you come from a hot country and you come to New Zealand in the winter, renting a down jacket while you're here makes more sense, and so that'd be a revenue stream for us. Would mean that the actual garment itself gets worn and again and again, and the person can enjoy it while they're here without having to take a heavy jacket back to Malaysia or wherever they're from.
Wonderful. And you're a company that's based in both the UK and New Zealand, which is lovely. And also, I hear you're getting into the Chinese market. You've just been to China.
That's right, yes, very exciting. So I went to China last month to meet our partners who we've been working with for the last few months. And basically they're a distribution and an e-commerce company based in Beijing. And they have launched our brand yesterday on the JD.com website, which is an enormous e-commerce platform. So it's kind of like Amazon, but even bigger. And they have all the luxury brands on there. So we have what they call a flagship store on there. And it means that the people who are buying luxury clothing know that it is not counterfeited, which is an issue in China actually. So they know it's a genuine article and it'll be shipped from our warehouse directly to the consumer, and that's all organised by JD.com.
Wow, so it's exciting times.
Really exciting.
Yeah. So you're based in New Zealand, the UK, and now China.
That's right, yeah.
So, but as we've said before, this has been 10 years in the making. So maybe you could go back and tell us a little bit about the journey over the last 10 years.
Sure. So we kind of developed the brand. We got to market basically sort of almost 3 times. We were third time lucky actually. So we had 2 kind of issues before which prevented us actually getting to market. The first issue was just working with a partnership, trying to get the products right, but we just couldn't get them to the quality and that was right for the Edmund Hillary brand. Mm-hmm. So that sort of fell apart fairly early on. We then formed a partnership that was looking to launch about sort of 6 or 7 years ago, but again the investment didn't quite come in. We just sort of came up against hurdles, which is very kind of normal in developing business, and so because we really believed in the brand, we just kept soldiering on until we kind of found the right partners, the right investment, and got the product completely right. We looked at various different market positionings. We looked at a more of a sort of mid-market range. That just wasn't right. It sounded, it's funny when you're talking about it, it can sound as if it could really work, but when you actually kind of start producing the samples and start looking at the quality, what quality you get to be a kind of mid-market price product, the products just weren't right, and as soon as you saw them you could tell. So we eventually landed on a kind of high-end premium product, and we've had really good feedback about the quality and how the quality is kind of reflective of Ed Hillary, and he was a guy that would have, quality was really important to him. He would have worn clothes year after year, as people did back in the sort of 50s and 60s, and he always looked for clothing that would last. So that was really important.
And so far, men's clothes only, but you've got some exciting news for us women, which
that's
is
right.
October, is it?
End of October, that's right. So, and it's funny because when you're kind of planning a brand, almost in a way, you've got this wonderful heritage that we were lucky enough to have, but you've kind of got a bit of a blank sheet of paper. And so, Edmund Hillary, quite a masculine name, so menswear products sort of came very naturally and seemed quite obvious. Womenswear just wasn't that obvious to us, and it was only actually when we launched, and we have women coming every single day saying, do you do womenswear? When are you going to do womenswear? Our sort of retail partners, because we have clothing in other stores throughout New Zealand, have said that they think they can sell twice as much womenswear as menswear, because the women's market is actually about double the size of the menswear market generally. So womenswear will be coming out, a range of jackets will be coming out at the end of October. It's really exciting.
So we can find these online, Claire,
that's right, edmundhillary.com.
Also have a store or 2 stores.
Yep, so we have our own brand store in Queenstown Airport in Queenstown, New Zealand, and we have 4 other stores throughout New Zealand, other retailers that are just stocking our brand for us, and then edmundhillary.com website.
So for those listeners that don't really know Queenstown, who are listening from all over the world, Queenstown is where you go bungee jumping. So would we buy your clothes to go bungee jumping or to climb the mountains in the area? People come for different sports activities in the area, don't they? So a perfect location actually to sell your brand.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I say, they're clothing that you can wear to do adventures in. You wouldn't actually wear them to go up Everest because it's very highly technical clothing, which we haven't developed as yet. So the reason we decided to go for more of a fashion kind of brand rather than a technical brand is because the mountaineering market is actually quite small. Also, Edmund Hillary had appeal to a really wide range of people, not just the mountaineering market. So we decided to kind of produce a brand that would be much wider than that.
Yeah. And I love the fact there's a story behind it. You know the family well now, don't you? Could you tell us more about the family?
Sure. So Peter is the person we know most in the family, and he's the son of Sir Edmund Hillary, and he has a sister called Sarah. And Peter's the children of Peter that are involved in the brand are George, Alexander and Lily, and they are all sort of keen mountaineers, but they've also got their own jobs, outside of that. But they've kind of been gently encouraged into mountaineering, so it's not something that was ever forced on them, but they all just absolutely love it, and as a family they have adventures all the time. So Peter and his two sons have been doing the 7 Summits climbs, where they climb the highest peak in every single continent. So I think they've done 5 of them now, and Peter's climbed Everest twice in his life. They were the first sort of father and son duo to have both climbed Everest separately, and Alexander will be the 3rd generation climbing Everest, and he'll be climbing it next year, which is really exciting.
An extraordinary legacy, isn't it?
I just love the whole thing and how it comes together. Like, you've obviously Edmund Hillary had faced adversity in his life, and the challenges he took on and conquered, when nobody ever had, the first man to ever climb Everest. I mean, it's just incredible. And then the other things he went on to achieve as well. And then, and then he poured everything back into helping the people of Nepal. It was just, so he spread that message of kindness and helping others in need, because he had that passion, and that's what drove him, didn't it? And even through, because he had adversities in life, didn't he? He had suffering, and but still carried on. Yeah,
that's right. He lost his wife and Louise and his daughter in a small plane crash in Nepal, so that was an enormous thing for him to have to deal with. So that was incredibly hard. And he was a very humble man, so he just was a beekeeper, and he definitely didn't want fame or adulation. He was just someone that was just quite determined. So he always said, I had modest abilities but a great deal of determination. The quote that Edmund Hillary is probably best known for is, "It's not the mountain we conquer but ourselves." And what he meant by that is, it's not all about necessarily achieving one great famous accomplishment. It's actually about developing as yourself as a person and getting to where you want to be in life. So he definitely didn't want fame. He was quite bemused by it.
Yes.
He kept saying, it doesn't do him any harm, but you shouldn't believe all that rubbish that the media say about you. You need to stay grounded. And I think his values, those sort of traditional values of kind of humility, endeavour, determination, are just really relevant today. Because I think people are kind of a bit over the kind of famous for being famous type of culture that's been around for a bit, and much more about being really, really authentic and really kind of mean what you say. So I think that's why for him, being able to help the people of Nepal, the Himalayan communities, just meant so much more to him than kind of he getting to the peak of the mountain was amazing, but then you had to kind of get down again. And the adulation all just felt a bit crazy to him. So
what a lovely analogy in life, isn't it?
And I really just
going to the mountaintop and falling back down again, or having to start all over again.
Well, you reach one peak, don't you? You have to go on and carry on till you reach your next goal. And he had goals, and he did not let anything stop him from achieving his goals, did he?
Exactly.
He just carried on, putting one foot in front of the other. He truly believed that he could do something, so he showed that steely determination, and look what he achieved. It's absolutely incredible. And then, but I look back now to what you've done and the legacy you're helping leave as well, like honouring Sir Edmund Hillary with the brand, then giving back to all his charities that he set up, and that's an incredible thing to do. But the tenacity and the determination that you have shown for 10 years, I think it really can teach our listeners something, because I think, in this day and age where we see people on Instagram, we think people get things so easily. But as you say, media can portray anything. It doesn't quite work like that, does it? If you really, really want something, you put in the hard yards and you really work for it.
Yeah, and I think, the things I've sort of learnt from it, and, don't get me wrong, we're definitely not there yet. We've only really started out on this journey. But, getting to this point, I would say that, one thing is just kind of doing something towards it every day, especially if you're not feeling that positive and you're going through quite a hard thing. If you just kind of do one thing towards it, even if it's just an email or researching something online or something, and if you're doing something towards that goal, and all those somethings kind of add up as you go along, and kind of the momentum takes off again. And the second thing is just kind of really, I know it's nothing new, and I know this is a lesson that you hear quite a lot, but just if you believe in it and you're getting enough positive feedback from people, then it can work out if you just keep at it.
Yeah.
Just keep working at it.
So you've talked about, Claire, both ability and determination. So what would you say to our listeners that are setting out or embarking on small businesses, new adventures? We know that about 50-60% of small ventures fail in the first year, or maybe more than that. Were there times that you felt you just wanted to give up? What would you say to listeners who are at that stage now, just thinking we're not getting breakthrough, but have only been going for about a year? What advice would you give?
I believe, I'm a researcher by background, and so I really believe in research. I just don't think you can ever do enough research, and I don't mean just looking online. I mean kind of finding out who your customers are and just talking to as many of them as possible. Even if it's just a coffee or a phone call or a something, just to kind of really tap into something about their life where you may think there's a gap in the market, but just kind of digging a little bit deeper to find out what is it, what is that thing, and what is it about their lives, and understanding about their lives, about what would make them go out and get that product or the service or whatever it might be. So I really, really do believe in research, and we've definitely done a lot of that over the years. We never really stopped researching, to be honest. And I think just the other thing is the kind of juggle. So I think it's really hard to set up a business and to put all your eggs in one basket, because it is a risk. As you say, a lot of businesses fall over. So if you've got an income coming in, if you can kind of find a way to develop that business on the side, even if it's an hour a day, half an hour a day, but just keep at it, and just realise that things often take longer than you expect them to. So as you say, 10 years, it's a long time, but it's it's not too long. If you're going to get there, it's that's okay. So I think you can be doing your normal life, bringing in your normal income stream, and just kind of beavering away in the background. And all that sort of research and time adds up in the end.
That's great advice. But I love the fact that you could have cut corners in your business, and you could have maybe launched years before with a lesser product, but you were so determined to have a certain product, for it to be sustainable, for it to be ethical. So that's probably why it's taken a little bit extra time, isn't it? Because you had an idea of what actual product you wanted, and you weren't actually willing to compromise on that. Yeah,
and I think also because the family are very much involved with the business, so they're kind of involved in a lot of the decision making along the way. And one thing that they, were determined about right from the start is that it should be totally kind of authentic to Ed. And so we actually use his values in our kind of day-to-day decision making. So literally down to the materials that we use, to the marketing that we have, or the imagery, it all comes down to, is it true to him? Would he approve of this? So that has been really important. So like, for example, when we looked at those different, as I said, that sort of mid-market positioning, the quality wasn't there, that kind of didn't feel right to him.
Yes.
And actually we had that in our research, that the one concern that future customers had was, is it going to be high enough quality? People were really worried that it was going to be into the mass produced, and it wouldn't actually live up to him and what he stood for. So yeah, that kind of helped guide us, I guess, the whole way through.
I love that. It proves that you actually really need to understand what your values are, or the company's values, doesn't it? You need to really set them quite firmly, to then you can stick to them. You know, you ask the question, is it this, is it this, is it this? Are we meeting those value milestones?
And the need of the customer as well. What is the need of the customer?
Absolutely.
If it's a service industry, what's the need of your client?
Yeah, it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah, what is the need that you're meeting? And I gather also the family have been, or some of the family have been seen on a catwalk, is that right?
That is right, at New Zealand Fashion Week. So we launched pretty much a year ago this week, and we had our professional models, so modelling the gear, and then the kind of grand finale of the show was George, Alexander and Lily individually walking in the outfits, and then at the end the three of them walked together with all the models behind them, and it was kind of really quite emotional. A few people were crying and stuff.
And
so
that brought a tear to the eye.
It was amazing. It was really amazing actually, and we got so much media coverage. It was incredible, like on the 6 o'clock news, both channels, and all across the papers and all the fashion press and everything. So it's pretty special.
That must have been a very proud moment.
It was really proud. It was very, very nerve-wracking because we were totally involved in all the organisation, from everything to literally kind of producing the socks for the models to wear, to inviting, making sure all the right people were there, and it was a lot of work, but it was really, really exciting. Yeah, it was successful.
And clearly, Claire, you've got a really good team. You've got a team working in England as well as New Zealand.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And your husband Mike's involved in the business as well.
That's right. So he's CEO. Yeah, and I run the marketing, and we have a production and design team back in the UK, and then we have our shop staff here as well as contractors. So we have a PR company, for example, and various other people that help us along the way.
And how fundamental do you think it is to get the right team to work together?
It's everything, to be honest. Yeah, absolutely. And I think every single person that's involved in the moment absolutely loves the brand. It's beyond kind of earning money or anything like that. Everyone kind of really, really believes in the longevity of the brand, the power of the brand, and they're just totally dedicated, and they work way beyond any time that they're paid for. So yeah, we're very grateful to them.
So you've been working really hard for 10 years. You hit Fashion Week last year at in New Zealand Fashion Week. You had your really, really proud moment. Your tenacity and your courage and your steely determination has paid off, and you are now in China, which is really incredible. It's exciting that your Womenswear is coming out next month, so there's obviously going to be huge growth within the business coming up, which is fabulous for you guys and fabulous for the legacy of Sir Edmund Hillary, and it can only benefit all the charities. So is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with, Claire?
I think something about Ed, which I think we can all learn for, is there's a lot about him, about sort of greatness and being the first and all the rest of it. But when you actually read about him and read the kind of things he said, ultimately he was an ordinary man, and what was the most important thing to him was other people and his family, which I think most people will kind of agree on. And so there's a quote here which I think is incredibly touching, and it is, "Each of us has to discover his own path, of that I am sure. Some paths will be spectacular, others peaceful and quiet. Who is to say which is the most important? For me, the most rewarding moments have not always been the great moments, for what can surpass a tear on your departure, joy on your return, or a trusting hand in yours?" It's really beautiful, isn't it?
Lovely?
So beautiful.
It just shows that life isn't all about the mountain tops, actually, isn't it? That a lot of life is about the valleys and what we learn in the valleys, so that we can actually go back to the mountain tops. And Claire, if we wanted to contact you or find your website, where would we go?
If you go to edmundhillary.com and you look under team, you can see all of our details, so you'll be able to find it there.
Claire, we are so grateful you spared the time to come and chat to us today. I have to say, I am so inspired to buy your clothing that I might also climb a mountaintop because I've bought your clothing.
That's exactly it. It's about being inspired.
Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.